Now you have your fashion designs, your technical design flats. You've created those either as a result of fashion design or product development. At the end, those technical design flats are now in your hands and you have to bring them to life. In those technical design flats, there should be fabric callouts. Now the job is to go and look for those materials. Fabric and sourcing is a very important element in the whole process, and we're going to talk about sourcing throughout. I don't think we can give one section just to sourcing by itself because it happens throughout the process. So I'm going to sprinkle in the subject matter of sourcing throughout every section in which it's necessary. In the early stages of your process, if you have access to fabric and materials, if you know where to get fabric and materials, it's best to start securing your fabrics sooner rather than later. You can do this on your own, or you can work with a sourcing agent, or you can hire a firm that understands fashion design and development. And most firms like ours, we would have people that would assist you in the whole entire process of materials and fabric sourcing. There's a lot of different nuances about how fabric works and behaves, especially if you're working with lining and other items that require equal stretch, two-way stretch, four-way stretch. These are things that you may not know about immediately on hand, but the fabric places that you'll be visiting may ask you, are you looking for a two-way or four-way stretch? And we'll discuss how all that works here in just a moment. In your fashion design flats, your technical design flats, there should be the fabric callouts. So go and secure the fabric, because the next phase is called product development. And in product development, whoever is going to do your product development is going to need to know what kind of fabrics you're working with. The first stage of product development is called pattern making. Now, let me take a sidestep and talk a little bit about what pattern making is and what pattern making isn't. And I hate that term pattern making because it's very confusing. In my industry, it's a subject I have to talk about almost every day, especially with startups. The universally understood definition of the term pattern is fabric that's got printing on it, the printing and the graphics on fabric. Yes, that is a pattern. But that is not the definition of patterns on the apparel design and development side. Our definition of pattern is a pattern are the architectural renderings, the schematics of the garment. Think about this. If you want to build a house, you can't just go and buy wood and just start building. You have to have, again, a roadmap. It's the blueprints. This is where the kitchen is going to go. This is the hallway, and this is the bedroom, and this is the piping and the plumbing and the electrical, all that stuff. Out of my pay range, I have little to no understanding of how houses are made. But I do know that in order to make a house, you need a blueprint. It's the exact same thing in apparel. Every one of your technical design flats will require a pattern, a blueprint, the architectural renderings, all the math and geometry that goes into making a garment. That's called pattern making. A pattern maker, now you have your fashion designs, your technical design flats. You've created those either as a result of fashion design, learning the craft, and a really good pattern maker has at least 5 years of pattern making experience. Any pattern maker that has worked with me at my company has at least 10 years of pattern making experience because it is a technical skill. It's something that's really in high demand. There are not a whole lot of pattern makers out there in the world. The ones that exist are golden. In order to make patterns, you can do it, pattern makers do it either by hand, which means they draw everything out. They take your technical design flat with your specs and on paper, on what's called oak tack paper, or even thin white paper. There's big rolls of paper that they lay everything out, and they can draw it out by hand. All the measurements, all the specs, all the parts, all the pieces, the hood for the hoodies, the sleeves for the shirts, it's all drawn out, and all the math and geometry all laid out so that they can then use that pattern and go to the next phase. That's really old school. That I don't really know any pattern maker these days that really does it that way by hand. Most pattern makers use specific pattern making software. There's a lot of great software out there that allows for the pattern making process to happen. There's Tech, there's Gerber, there's Pad, there's Optitex, there's all different types of software. And essentially they all more or less do roughly the same thing. And any good pattern maker is very well versed and knowledgeable in how to operate the software. When you provide your technical design flat with your size specs, with your fabric selections to a pattern maker, that pattern maker should be able to properly spec out all the parts and pieces of the garment, inside and out. You know, if it's a jacket, it's got lining on the inside, it's got pockets on the inside and outside. Like this jacket, for example, it's got a zipper down the side, it's got lining. Every portion of this garment needs to be appropriately spec'd out using math and geometry in software that's specific to the apparel industry. Well, actually, Gerber software is used across a wide variety of industries. I think they even design aircrafts with Gerber. But you know, if you can design an aircraft with software, you can certainly design apparel. But a lot of pattern making software is specific to apparel. So Tukatech or Pad or Optitex, these are all apparel specific pieces of software. When your pattern maker has your technical design flat, your size spec, and your fabric, they will be able to make you a pattern. The reason they need the fabric is because fabric has a lot of different types of stretchability, two-way stretch and four-way stretch. And within the two-way stretch means your fabric only stretches it horizontally. Four-way stretch is horizontally and vertically. Make sense? So if your fabric has four-way stretch, the geometry that's involved in pattern making is going to be different than if your fabric had two-way stretch. When you make your pattern, you have to consider that pattern maker needs to now, once the base size is established from your specs, they will then need to grade your patterns for different sizes, small, medium, large, extra large. That all happens within the pattern making process. When you have your initial basic size specs married with the fabric, the pattern maker will know appropriately how much tolerance to allow for every portion of the garment so that it can be properly spec'd out in sizing, and so that it also meets your size specs. So the pattern maker, not to be confused with a pattern on fabric, it's a whole different pattern, it's a whole different definition. A pattern maker is a particular type of skill set. A pattern maker has gone to pattern making school or fashion design school, has spent at least 1 or 2 semesters or 4 quarters of time learning the craft, and has spent at least 5 years mastering that craft, because there's a lot of geometry involved in the apparel, in any garment. When you're dealing with, it's not just 2-dimensional, even 3-dimensional. Sometimes it's 4-dimensional because it's got stretch in it, and it's got a lot of parts and pieces that need to work together to make that garment work. That's pattern making. And so in the apparel development process, the first phase, the first step is to make the patterns. I hope I've done a good job explaining what a pattern is as compared to what the universally understood definition of the term pattern is. But the word pattern is different in the apparel development space than it is, anywhere else.